Well, hi folks. This presentation, I hope that, hope so you can hear me. This is talking about using open source tools to emulate cyber attacks. And my name is Duane Dunston. I'm a senior adversarial engineer at Cloud Range. So Cloud Range, we create cyber attacks in a cyber range in the cloud, and then we bring teams in to train them how to identify those cyber attacks. And they go through the whole, it's a network setup just like a regular organizational network. And then they have to come in and they have a few hours to work through the training simulation. And we also have a trainer there with them to help guide them through the process as well. And these are some of our customers that we provide cyber training to. And it's a little bit about my background. I was a former professor at Champlain College teaching cybersecurity, and got my doctorate in curriculum teaching and learning and leadership from Northeastern. Have certifications from MITRE, and this is my 26th year in the field of cybersecurity. So what we're going to talk about is what threat emulation is, and these bullet pointed items you see here on this list. So what is threat emulation? Well, threat emulation is you are carrying out the attacks that a normal threat actor would carry out on your system. And by that, I mean you're executing their payloads, which may be legit, or when I say legitimate, it may be real malware, such as Mimikatz, for example, or moving laterally through the organization. And also performing attacks such as local and remote privilege escalation, and then exfiltrating data. And one reason for doing this is to test your security controls, also to test your response capabilities. And as Joshua mentioned earlier in one of his presentations, if you have playbooks, then you can go through the process of testing your playbooks to see how well did you all detect all the attacks that were carried out. And I'll talk about that more as we go through the presentation. But with threat emulation, you are emulating the behaviors of adversaries. And one of the first open source tools there are out there is the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And the MITRE ATT&CK framework, when I first started or first heard about it, first looked at it, I just browsed away from it because it looked way too intimidating to try to understand that. But once I went through really free training that they have on cybrary.it, the fundamental course by my mentor, Jimmy Williams, really, I mean, it not only introduced me to the framework, but I saw how powerful of a framework this can be. And so with the MITRE ATT&CK framework, you have TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. Initial access is a tactic. At the top of the attack framework, you have these, really the goals that they're trying to achieve, and these are the tactics. And then beneath this are the techniques. And in this example I have here, you have a tactic of initial access. These are a few of the techniques that you can see. One technique for initial access is phishing. And within this phishing, you have these three sub-techniques. And one of the most common is spear phishing with an attachment, or spear phishing with a link. So this tool is useful because what they have on their website is they've mapped out many of the threat groups that exist out there. So if I click on phishing and I go to the sub-techniques here and the procedures, you can see the threat groups that use this type of attack. In this case, HiKit has been spread through spear phishing, or Axiom has used spear phishing to initially compromise victims. And when I click on Axiom here, I get information about this particular threat group. And the nice part about it even further is I get this nice map of their TTPs. And so the way I would use this, and one way to start out with learning how to use threat emulation in your organization is to see who do these groups target. And if they target one of these industries that is in your industry, it's a starting point. I don't mean to say that look at all these and then you're covered by all the threats out there. No, what this does is gives you something to work off of. And what you can do is take a look to see what are their TTPs. And you can see that they are mapped out here. And then they have details about what they actually do with each one of these techniques. So when I hover over this little map that pops up explains to me what that particular behavior of this threat actor is. And what you can do with threat emulation is you can emulate this behavior to determine, can you detect this within your organization? Because again, it allows you to test your incident response capabilities and also to test the tools that you may have in place for threat emulation. And also feel free to ask questions at any point in the channel. All right. So that's a quick overview of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Once again, cybrary.it has a free training course on how to interpret and how to use the attack framework. As a matter of fact, all of the attack defender training, the MAD training, is available for free on the cybrary.it website. And it really goes into depth to show you the real power of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And so what is the actual process? How do you actually carry out a threat emulation exercise? Well, it could be a couple of ways. And what they have, the threat-informed defense, which again is a MITRE organization, is they have these sample threat emulation exercises that you can test with. And one way to really get to know if this is of value to you is to look to see who these threat groups target and then emulate that behavior in your organization. And I'll talk about that in more detail in just a few minutes. So Fin7 is one of the groups that they talk about a lot. It's a financially motivated group. And what we're looking at here is the actual plan. This is the layout. This is one way you can document the process for threat emulation. So you can see right away, don't get intimidated by this, but let me just say that first of all, it's a lot going on here. But when you go into the details of it, they break it down, explain to you how to carry out this particular threat emulation exercise. And if I go to infrastructure here, you start to learn first of all, what you need to do to set up the environment, and then the various commands and tools you're going to use for this threat emulation exercise. And something that's really, really important about threat emulation, you're emulating the behavior. So you don't have to download the malicious tools that are actually used by the threat actor. You can emulate that using other behaviors. For example, if they have a customized tool that uses SSH or SCP to send files out the organization, you don't have to use that particular tool. You can use SCP or PSCP. Those are free open source tools, and they emulate the behavior. So you can still determine if you can detect it executing on your system. Now, one thing you do get from our threat intel reports is you get a list of the process and executable names that are used by threat actors. So you can take pscp.exe and rename it to, I don't know, win.exe, because that may be the name of an application, or correction, that may be one of the names of the files that the threat actor uses. And so you can rename it and then search for that within your organization. The other way to carry out an adversary emulation exercise are through micro emulations. And with these, you're just performing a small subset of TTPs of a threat actor or a technique of a threat actor to determine, once again, can you detect this in your organization? For example, with log clearing right here, log clearing. This will take you through the process, first of all, understanding why you should search for this, and this is something you really want to search for. But what they're showing you here is a way that you can emulate this behavior. Instead of having to download a known malicious tool that clears logs, then you can just, first of all, use the clear event log command in PowerShell, and that will generate the message that's typically generated when someone clears a log. And in this case, the audit log was cleared is the message that you will see. And so you can test your controls to determine, one, can you detect this? And two, do you get an alert for it? Yes, this open source repo is a really invaluable resource, absolutely. Because for one, a lot of the work has been done for you, and two, you get to see a format of how to carry out this in your own organization. So just be aware that a full-scale emulation takes a lot of coordination between your IT staff, your employees who may be impacted by it, and then micro emulations. Once again, it is something you still want to plan out, because you want to, well, it depends on how you choose to carry out this plan, which we'll talk about here shortly. So one of the reasons why we use open source tools is because it really is more appealing as an entry point, because some tools cost a lot of money. Scythe and Cobalt Strike are commercial, and many organizations may not have the budget to pay for licenses for these tools. And with Cobalt Strike, Metasploit is probably your next best option for something similar. I'm going to show you a demonstration towards the end of the presentation on using MITRE's Caldera, which is an open source tool for threat emulation. And these are three other tools that you can, three tools you can use. One is the Atomic Red Team. So if you are a Windows-only environment, that may be more appealing to you, because Atomic Red Team are all PowerShell scripts. And the nice thing about this is that you can chain these attacks so they are carried out in the manner in which that threat actor carry out their campaign. And keep in mind that you don't have to emulate every single activity of that threat actor. You can carry out a subset of those. And the atomicredteam.io website has thorough documentation on how to use Atomic Red Team for threat emulation. And then Caldera is an open source platform created by MITRE. Once again, I'll show you a demonstration of that. And I also will have show you a link to a course that I created on how to use MITRE Caldera to perform threat emulation. And I'll talk about that more in just a few minutes. And then Metasploit. Many of you may already be familiar with Metasploit, but it's another adversary emulation tool. And again, an open source alternative to the commercial tools like Scythe and Cobalt Strike. Not undermining those tools, it just many organizations may not have the budget for those. And so there are some really important best practices to keep in mind, and things you want to consider before carrying out a threat emulation exercise. And you want to be sure you have a scope and a plan for what you plan to do and why you want to do it. So once again, that MITRE attack or the Threat Informed Defense website is a good starting point to help you understand what the steps are that you should go through in order to perform a threat emulation exercise. On the cybersecurity.it website, they have a threat emulation. MITRE has a threat emulation. Well, if you pay for the certification track, you get a certificate, but the training for that is free through cybersecurity.it. So that threat emulation training goes through the process of explaining to you what steps you should go through in order to carry out a threat emulation exercise in much more detail than I can go through in this presentation. Now, the big question: how do you actually do this? Do you perform it on an isolated network? Do you perform it on a subset of your network, like via virtual machines or physical devices? Or do you carry it out on your actual production environment? So let's talk about that. If you are in an organization where systems are mission critical or could impact life property, then you probably don't want to test those on a production network. Now, the threat actors, they're going to do it anyway, but one way to get support for threat emulation is to create the plan for what you want to do, what tools you want to run, and then test each one of those before you carry out the full plan. That way you can get some support from those who are going to ask, have you tested these tools? I mean, any admin is going to ask you that question. What's the behavior of this? Is it going to impact anything on our systems? And so really the best way to do that is to go through the process of testing each of those tools, the techniques, each one of the scripts, run it separate. See what the behavior is on the system before you run a full-blown exercise. That also gets you support, because when that question comes up, what's the impact? You can say, oh, well, we noticed that this happened and we found a workaround for that, or we can identify when it happens and we can get that service back up and running pretty quickly. And that's the kind of questions you're going to want to respond to if you choose to perform this on a production network. So once again, but if you're like a healthcare facility, if you're an industrial control system, those can be some relatively sensitive systems, and also you have potentially life at stake here as well. So one thing I would recommend you do is in those environments, test on an isolated network or segmented network, but be sure that network is representative of your production network. So if at all possible, in that segmented network, put the same tools, the same applications, the same settings that you have in production to give you a really good idea of what may happen. You have to have all the stakeholders involved, and this is including non-IT people. Management support is crucial because you could potentially, if you run this in production, you could impact production. Or if you want to run this in virtual machines or you want other hardware, then there may be costs involved with that. But you want to explain why that cost is important, because you want to ensure that when you put a control in place, such as, let's say you want to see if you can detect log clearing, and it's on a device that, I don't know, costs $20,000. Well, I mean, how are you gonna resolve that? Is there a VM that you can use? Is there another similar application you can use that's similar to it to give you a good idea of it? Or do you want to purchase it? Can you use your backup license and install it in that segmented network? You want other people involved, such as those who would be impacted by, such as a ransomware attack. So you're somebody from finance, somebody from HR. You don't need the entire department. You just need someone who can speak on behalf of those folks in their organization. That way, when the exercise is ongoing, they can report what they see, which is a part of that, cybersecurity awareness training that they should be involved in. And also they're involved to understand why they need to ensure and follow best practices when it comes to cybersecurity hygiene. So they understand, oh, wow, if I click on that link or if I open the attachment, it can do all this to our network. It gets people's attention. So you want to ensure that folks are involved who could be impacted by a cyber attack. And then you want to document your results and ensure that all the appropriate people are made aware of what the results are and what you're going to do to resolve those. Because when you put an alert in place for some threshold, if there are 5 failed logins on this particular, you may have a system that's incredibly sensitive and you want to know if there's 1 or 2 failed logins. Well, the only way to test that is to log in and fail 2 times. So that's why it's important to be able to test or perform a threat emulation, because you can test your alerts. You don't know if that alert is going to work unless you test it. And you may have a threat actor in your environment or exploit a vulnerability, and you expected this alert to work, but you never tested to see if it does work. Adversary emulation helps you with that. Purple teaming is a fun exercise. It brings in, and this is, I'm not going to say it's only for large organizations to have a dedicated red team and a dedicated blue team. This can be between the one security administrator, and this could be against all the admins in the system. So the IT person is the red team, system admins are the blue team. And basically what's happening here is you can schedule this so that the admins know, okay, guys, between 8 and 10, between 10 a.m. and 12 a.m., we're going to be, performing this exercise, and we want to see if you all can detect these things. Or you may have it set up so you can say, okay, folks, at some point this month or some point this week, we're going to carry out a threat emulation exercise. And so that puts them in a unique position where they have to really be sure that they're paying attention to their logs, paying attention to learning, to their systems, etc. And what happens is the red team perform the exercise, the emulation exercise, and then the blue team can either detect it right away and block it, or they document what they see, and then they come together. Blue and red come together. Blue and red makes purple, and they come together and figure out, okay, did you all see me do this? Did you all see me do that? And they're like, no, we didn't. Okay, we got to fix that. This is not a time to pick on anybody. This is not a time to ridicule people because they didn't find anything. You may have had a alert in place or security control in place, And then 3 months later, that control was removed, or some system update caused it to break. It happens. Organizations change, processes change, applications change, systems change. And this adversary emulation exercise is helping you to catch those things before a threat actor gets into your system and you're not able to detect it, because we put controls in place and we just expect it to work. That's not how it works. We got to routinely test this, continuous monitoring. And so this purple teaming is good because you get everybody together and everybody's on the same page. So it's a learning exercise. And it can make your job a lot more fun as well. So you do want to create a plan to test regularly. It does not have to be a full-scale emulation exercise because it takes a long time to plan those. It can be those micro plans where, okay, this week I'm going to clear the logs and see if anyone detects that. There was someone I follow on Twitter, and they made a post, Swift on Security, if you follow them on Twitter. They posted that an admin came to them and said, hey, it looks like someone added this description, this weird description to this user's profile in Active Directory. And they said, yeah, but I did that 3 years ago. so this black box testing, if you will, where you give them some kind of warning, or you say, I'm going to do this to let them know that an exercise is going to be carried out, so they don't get too caught off guard by it. But it's a good way to test, to ensure folks are monitoring and continuously testing the security controls. And you want to ensure that you testings, and I can't, I'm repeating myself there because it's really important that you test every control, every part of your emulation plan. You want to test every part of your adversary emulation plan in small stages first before the full-scale exercise. And in the course that I have, I show you how to do that process, how to test each individual control first, and then you build that profile and run the attack. And any of your findings, you want to ensure that you have a plan in place that will help to remediate any issues you find, any alerts that weren't triggered, or if alert was triggered but they didn't know how to interpret it, or they didn't detect it. Why didn't they? Figure it out why and then correct that. This is not to embarrass anybody. It's to help improve the security of your organization. That's the ultimate goal. And so this is your, a summary of the things you want to do to build and create a adversary emulation plan and exercise within your organization. All right, so let's take a look at a lab demo. I need to bring up my notes here so I can jump to the specific points here. I'll talk about the course in just a minute. I'm going to go full screen here. There we go. All right. We'll disable audio. Just me talking. Okay. There you go. All right. So what we're looking at here is the web console for the MITRE Caldera. It's a full suite of adversary emulation exercises. Excuse me. And every release, they have these profiles here, and they have default profiles set up. Known threat actors, or just things like ransomware, or log clearing, etc. And you can just select those and then run those in your organization. But you have to do some configuring, such as which host that you want to connect to, domain name, etc., usernames, things like that. And so in the training course that I created, that's open for anyone, it goes through the PISA or Mespinoza threat group. And I do a couple of things there. One is we walk through a threat intelligence report, and I show how to take that threat intel report and turn it into what you see right here, actionable threat emulation exercise. And then this is the agent on a Windows 10 system. And with every agent that you install in your network, it's going to show up here and it'll let you know what, when was last seen. You can change your name so you know where it's located, has the host name, etc. Right. This is the threat intel report that's used throughout the training course. And once again, I don't show you how to do every single step involved in this in this particular intel report, but it goes through many of the common behaviors of the threat actor. For example, they use the advanced port scanner or the advanced IP scanner. I didn't use any of those for this exercise. I wanted to use native tools that I'm familiar with. And also, I did use Mimikatz, and I did want to explain something about this. The MITRE Caldera framework has a script that you want to look for in the repository, and what it has is they have some. I'm using this term loosely, but they have some verified malicious tools like Mimikatz that don't have any backdoors in them. It's basically what I'm saying there. So they've vetted and ensured that all those don't have backdoors. So they do have some legitimate pieces of malware that you can download and use within MITRE Caldera. You have to download it separately though, but just be aware they do have tools like Mimikatz you can download as a part of MITRE Caldera. So I walked through this exercise, walked through this threat intel report so you can learn how to take a threat intel report that's relevant to your organization or your industry, and then create an adversary emulation exercise from that. And so what we're doing here is I'm adding more, in this case, another TTP to this particular emulation exercise. And here we're discovering localhost. This is one of the behaviors of the threat actor. And so they use the advanced IP scanner to scan the network to see what other hosts are there. Instead of downloading a third-party tool, I'm using this native tool that's built into Caldera to do a scan. So I don't have to download a third-party application. I'm emulating the behavior of the scanning, okay? And then as I work through this exercise and creating this profile, next thing I want to do is add in the PISA ransomware test. And then you see that's now a part of the exercise there. All right. And then what I have here, these are all the tests. So these are all the TTPs that I'm going to be using, sorry, for this threat emulation exercise. My mouse got away from me, right? There we go. And then pause this. All right. So, sorry. Oh, the beauty of live. I should have screenshotted this. Pause. There we go. All right. So these are the TTPs that I'm going to be emulating for this exercise. One of the first things they do is they disable Windows Defender. They disable control photo access, because control photo access is a tool that can block ransomware attacks. And it's a native Windows 10 feature. They change the file association. What this is on the desktop, they put a file that explains how to pay to get access to your files back. They also changed the login banner. So if you restart your system, then you're going to see this warning banner that tells you you've been infected. And then this test here performs the ransomware infection. Now, what I did for this ransomware infection, because on a production network, I don't want to accidentally actually encrypt legitimate documents. So what I did, I just renamed the document, because with the PISA and Mespinoza campaign, they will rename the encrypted files .pysa. So that's a very easy test to perform. Take a list of documents and rename it with a .pysa extension. So I don't have to encrypt any documents to emulate their behavior. Discover localhost, and this is a bit more robust, and you're going to see in just a moment, because it's going to find the AD server and it's going to enumerate the AD server. And then another TTP of the Espinosa group is that they delete shadow copies, because if they encrypt your files and you have a shadow copy, you can just restore it, and then their mission is thwarted. So they make sure that all shadow copies are deleted. All right. Keep clicking too far over. And so what I'm doing here is showing that the Windows Defender was disabled on the system. Oops, sorry. Right there. See, it was turned off in this case. And then lastly, see right there. So here's the warning banner that I created a PowerShell script to change the registry settings, and that ran in the background and changed the login banner. So now, as they will see in the organization, they will see that kind of message. And there's the README association. So here's the run. Here's all the tests that were performed for this threat emulation exercise. And I'm so sorry, I keep moving away from full screen. I apologize for that. This is emulating how they changed the README file to be opened by Notepad so that they can read the message for the encrypted files. All right. So we can see here all of our tests ran successfully. And I think, oh, there we go. So this is that discovery test. And on this network, I have a Windows 10 machine and I have Active Directory server. That's it. And what it did was it found the Active Directory server via that local host, local discovery, and it enumerated information from the AD server. So once again, this is something that you could potentially check to see if you're able to detect this within your organization. And it also shows that the threat actor don't have to zip and then exfiltrate data, because on their remote console on their C2 server, they can see this exact same data as I'm looking at right here. So MITRE Caldera is acting as the C2 server, command and control server, for this exercise. Okay, so that's a quick look at MITRE Caldera, but I do want to explain that this video you're seeing here, it is all in this course that I have available for free on the internet. And I walk through everything I talked about in more detail, talk about Bianco's pyramid of pain, which you've probably seen before, explaining the methods that are used to detect threat actor behavior and how things are easy down here, but it gets more difficult when you start looking at the TTPs and start analyzing their behavior. It's more easy to detect them. I also go through the MITRE ATT&CK framework and explain this in a bit more detail as well for each one of the tactics here. And then there's a couple of exercises I have here for you to work on. And basically what you do here is you find what TTPs these belong to for the attack framework, so you can learn how to create maps. And the last part here are the labs. These are all video tutorials, and I walk through the process of how I go through and test each one of the exercises before I carry it out. So I test the file association. I do that manually before I do it in my full exercise. I do the ransomware. I do a quick, it's a PowerShell script. It runs, it renews files in the directory, and that's all it does. It just emulates ransomware. And then the full operation is the full video that I just showed you. I just show snippets of. All right. And back to the screen here. And here's just some other resources that I have available. Creating a security plan, some tools that I wrote here. But this is the threat emulation course that is freely available. Shows you how to use Meta Caldera. I explain the setup for the lab that I have, and then we walk through the process of carrying out a threat emulation exercise based on a real threat intel report. Okay. All right. Anyone have any questions? Sorry, I'll leave this here in case folks want to screenshot that or take a photo of it. Let's see. I'm not sure if someone from VetSec is here, but yes, I can make it available. I'll also put the link. I have a tiny URL link to it as well. I put that in the channel here so you can grab it. Hey, thanks, Tanner. PZ2 XPKZV. Let me just test this real quick before I make it available to you, be sure it works. Yeah, that works. All right. So here's a tiny URL to the presentation. Thanks, Brad. Yeah, Michael. I don't know anything about the SANS threat emulation course. I'm not familiar with it at all. Well, familiar with the cost of it, that's about it. I still got about 8 minutes, so I'm gonna hang here in case anyone else have questions for the next 8 minutes or so. Oh, cool, Michael. Michael, I like that. And you know, that's a great threat emulation exercise. Just put a system on the network and yeah, just start doing some nmap scans. You don't have to go through these really elaborate threat emulation. Sorry about that. Yeah, you don't have to go through elaborate, exercises to perform threat emulation. It's a good old nmap scan. Oh wow, interesting. Yeah, that is still interesting because I know, well, like Security Onion will still alert on a scan. Like you'll see a bunch of, probes to RDP, SSH, and things like that. So it'll still report that there was a scan in a short period of time to a bunch of services. Yeah, it definitely depends on the tools you have in place to detect those kind of things. Yes. Yes, indeed. And once again, with Meta Caldera, they do have a bunch of profiles that they've created so that you don't have to, create your own. You can use the ones they have available. You just have to customize the IP addresses and host names and usernames, passwords you want to use for the exercise. And be aware that Meta Caldera has a ton of features, folks. It can do lateral movement and exfiltration. You can create your own custom scripts like I did, like I show you in this course that I have. I'll show you how to create your own custom scripts to run tests as well. So it's highly configurable and flexible. The IPS, most definitely fun. I'm not sure if anyone uses it, but I am still blown away by how uh, ready to use Security Onion is. Once you get it installed and out of the box, it just does an amazing job at catching all kinds of alerts. You do want to fine tune it so it's even better by all means, but out of the box, it is one of the better tools out there. I guess it's free and open source, but if you need paid support, you can get the paid plan. Yeah. And yeah, it has gotten better. I would say a lot of IDSs are able to detect things like a port scan, for example, which may seem really simple and basic, but they happen. It's a good indicator of reconnaissance and a precursor to a potential attack. So they have gotten better at recognizing short, these various scan types and picking up when it happens in rapid succession, and probes at a service like RDP and SQL and things like that, and create alerts. We just hope people are actually responding to them.